I'm McKinley Corbley, and you're listening to the Pro PTN Podcast, an interview talk show for piano technicians to tune in to what the pros are talking about from across the industry. If you enjoyed today's episode, show us some love by following us on your podcasting platform and leaving us a review. To learn more about us here at the Professional Piano Technicians Network, visit us at proptn.org. Hello, and welcome to another installment of the Pro PTN Podcast. I'm your host, McKinley, and today we are joined by the inventive and inspiring Deborah McCann, a Canadian piano technician who has just debuted the custom-made Ergo tuning hammers. Deborah, welcome to the show.
Oh, McKinley, I am quite amazed to be here and honored.
I mean, developing your own tuning hammer is definitely something to be celebrated.
So I had a huge part in this, but just a part. So I do want to give credit to Douglas Schmidt and Ken Stokes, and then all the other people who helped. So without the help of, my guinea pigs, it wasn't me who created this. It was sort of a group effort.
Well, it takes a village, that's for sure. Anything to get the right results.
Yes.
So again, thank you for joining us. We're really happy to have you. I'd love to start us off just by learning a little bit more about you. Can you start us off by giving us a rundown of your career, how you got started in piano technology, and where it's taken you over the years?
My dad used to bring actions and things home for repair right from the very beginning. And my dad taught my brother and I how to tune pianos. And he learned from his dad, who learned from his father-in-law, my grandma's dad. And also my Uncle Ricky's a piano tuner. And none of us ever thought we wanted to be piano tuners until we grew up, went out in the real world, and had a taste of that.
Wow. So did you have any other dream careers that you wanted to pursue before piano technology?
Well, I trained racehorses for 10 years, and that helped move me towards tuning pianos. That is a really silly way to try and make a living.
That's a first. I feel like piano technology is already a very niche industry, but training racehorses is pretty specific.
In the elementary school library, there was this book about secretariat and man of war. And so somehow in my head, I got it that I needed to train racehorses. So I pursued that up until my mid-30s and then went back to tuning pianos.
So then what was the spark that made you want to transition to the family business?
Common sense.
Okay, but common sense how? What was the moment of clarity that you had?
It's such a nice way to make a living. And after you've had to have a job where you're getting bossed around and you've got rules and you have to show up on time, I mean, you do as a piano technician, but you can still make the odd excuse. Like COVID was fantastic. I could change an appointment, no problem.
Right. And I imagine not having to scoop up horse manure is probably also a perk as well.
Training racehorses is a 24/7, 7 days a week. You do nothing else. Like there's a colleague from the racetrack who didn't go to her daughter's wedding because she had a horse in a race. So you do nothing else except that. And it's, to me, especially having been in the industry, it's pretty hard to have it be a humane thing to do. Anytime you're taking an animal and you're going to make bets on it and try and make money, things go sideways.
Right. So then how long have you been in piano technology now for?
I've been tuning independently on my own since 99.
Since 99. Okay, so coming up on 25 years then.
Yes.
Where has it taken you over the years?
Well, it's taken me into a lot of wonderful and sometimes weird situations.
Well, I absolutely loved browsing the photo gallery on your website, and I noticed some pretty interesting shots, including one piano being airlifted over the British Columbian wilderness and another of a piano being played on top of a snowy mountain. Can you tell us about some of these scenes and the stories behind them?
Okay, that was the same piano, and that was a super fun situation.
Okay.
It was years ago. So there was a company that did music videos out of Montreal to try and promote Canadian artists. And somehow they got a hold of me and they wanted a piano to use as a prop.
Ooh.
But they did want it to be able to perform at least one outdoor concert before they put it on a thing for moving it that actually my brother built and helicoptered it up to a fly-in only resort and then did the little video up there.
Wow.
Oh, so here's the thing about that piano. I find this old wreck of a piano for free. I tell them that it's no good, but I can piece this thing together enough for one performance. Perfect. We're all on the same page.
Wow.
They fly off with it. In my mind, it's gone. I'm never going to see the thing again. Then 3 years later, the local high school in Revelstoke phones me, and there's the piano. So, yeah, in their band room. And not at all tunable.
How did it make it down from the mountain into a high school? Did you get that backstory?
They would have helicoptered it back down. I don't know the politics behind that or who said it would be a good idea or why it didn't just be left on top of the mountain somewhere.
Free pianos sometimes just will not die. They just have to persist and keep bothering you.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what kind of piano was it?
I knew you were going to ask that. I don't remember. It was sort of a no-name thing, probably 60 years oldish.
How it is, yeah.
Terrible.
I'm not surprised.
Terrible piano.
Okay, well, what is the British Columbian piano tuning scene like up there? You've talked about that one crummy free piano, but what kind of pianos do you typically service the most? What are some of the most common difficulties of tuning in that climate, for instance?
The biggest issue here in the interior of BC is that our humidity swings so much. My worst scenario, and my dad tuned for it for 20 years, and I've been tuning for them for the last 20, is the Vernon Music School. And they have an old heritage house with 20 pianos in it, and those pianos with this archaic heating system, and the pianos will go 30 cents above or 30 cents below pitch in a very short period of time. And so it's super challenging.
Right. Are they pretty old at this point?
Nope. Well, they're older Yamahas. It's U1s that were bought from a piano store that my dad worked for in the 70s. Actually, one's from 1969. Anyways, they're really old. They've been played to death.
So do you typically tune a lot of standard household names, a lot of Yamahas, a lot of Kawais?
Yamaha, Kawai, lots of old Canadian mades. Pianos that have come up from New York are always fun.
Right.
So it's mostly Canadian made. And then there was a deal up here for a while. There's all these little mom and pop piano stores throughout Canada. And they would get these container loads full of pianos, and they wouldn't know what kind of pianos would be in the containers. Some were treasures and a lot were just disasters.
Wow.
And so either way, they would put them on their sales floor, and they'd get somebody like my dad to come in and try and fix them up and flog them off. Wow. So there's a lot of those around still.
Wow. Okay. What were some of your favorite and least favorite parts of coming from a family of piano technicians? Do you have any significant memories or tales of education and experience that stick out in your memory?
Everything was fun and still is fun. My dad passed a few years ago, but there is no bad part about being from a family of piano technicians.
Awesome.
And we all support each other, and we've got that extra pool of knowledge, and it's just fun. The piano tutors are a little bit weird, so unless you have contact with others, you kind of feel lonely.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm from a family of weirdos. Yes.
Well, my dad still has the piano that I grew up playing, and I tuned it for him for Father's Day. And I get all my musical genes for him, but he enjoyed sitting in and listening, and he listened to me tune the unisons, and he would say, okay, now it's in tune. And it wouldn't be in tune to my ears. But I didn't want to say that. So I was like, okay, just let me know when. Still a fun memory, which I'm going to hang on to. So I can only imagine if, you're all able to stay on the same page. So I also noticed some interesting historic pianos pictured in the gallery as well, many of which have some really gorgeous cases. Do you have any favorite pianos on your roster that have fun origin stories or memories or oddities attached to them?
My favorite was a lady phoned me. She was moving and wanted to sell her piano, and it had been her grandfather's piano. And it was the first piano that came to Salmon Arm. So it was 1885, cute little piano, but from 1885. And it hadn't probably been tuned for 50 years. So I was expecting this to be a no-go situation, but I took it apart. All the felt in there was like new. Everything is white and the red is bright. It's just incredible. It was an entire tone flat. So that was going to be an issue, but it came right up to pitch, no broken strings, no issues whatsoever.
Wow.
And a piano teacher bought it and loves it. So it was interesting that in 1885, they knew how to make a piano that was solid and would last. So it kind of bothers me a little bit sometimes when you come across a newer piano that, for one, takes a whole bunch of screws to take it apart. It's not designed to be serviceable. We had it right a long time ago. Why don't they just repeat that? I think that's a common frustration with piano technicians.
Of course. Do you do a lot of rebuilding work in your shop?
There's better rebuilders in the area, so I just contract that out.
Yeah. I've heard a lot about the manufacturing done on older Mason and Hamlins and Baldwins, and the bass section in those pianos is crazy. I feel like you notice it immediately. But I do remember one time my colleague and I were measuring an older Baldwin for string height because we were replacing the action. And as he was measuring the different string heights for the section breaks, every single break was coming in at the exact same measurement on the millimeter.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying, oh my gosh, that's crazy. How did they do that back then? They don't make them like they used to, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, totally empathize there.
Well, I think partly back then people took the time to figure it out and get it right. And now there's so much pressure to just produce something that we don't have the time to apply the science or the alchemy or really make it, try it, take it apart, do it again.
You know, the difference between handcrafted and mass manufactured.
It was unbelievable to open that piano up and look at basically a new instrument inside. The strings were shiny. Everything was just perfect.
Yeah. And I feel like I've gotten so used to approaching certain kinds of pianos from the outside, like based on the case parts or the key tops or something. I'll turn to the client and be like, look, this might not be a good idea. I can't guarantee that I'll be able to get much done because I'm so used to opening them up and finding mold and dead bugs and yada, yada, yada. So yeah, that is pretty cool to find.
Yeah.
But now that we've covered your background, why don't you tell our listeners about what you've been working on more recently, the Ergo tuning hammer, what inspired it, what challenges you had to overcome, and the innovation behind its design.
So I think 2.5 years ago-ish, I did the math. I'm not responsible with my finances. And I realized that there's no way I'm going to be able to retire. So with that in mind, I figured that I needed a nice new fancy tuning hammer. But because I've come from a long line of inventors and difficult people who want to do it their own way and reinvent the wheel, basically, I had an idea about what I wanted. I wanted the center to be oblong, and I wanted a ball at the end, and I wanted all these things. And nobody could do it. Nobody was able to figure out what on earth it is that I really wanted. So out of frustration, I just dismantled an old tuning hammer and made my own.
Awesome.
It worked okay, but the little pull through the middle thing was just an old antique one. It did have flex, and setting the pin sucked, and it wasn't a great thing. So at the same time that this was going on, Doug, who was a musician, he was having trouble with his thumb, and he wanted a specifically shaped handle as well. And somehow we got talking, and we started to figure out the science also behind it, where you want to have as direct a contact and a parallel as line and shorter tuning tip and all this. So Doug and I got talking about all the science that goes into pin control. And Doug had this engineer friend, Ken Stokes, and between the two of them, they started to come up with different designs. And mostly it was just this flat piece of metal with a tuning tip attached, which of course has no clearance, and it was heavy. So then we started figuring out we could do some bends with it and cut out the center part. And from there, it just sort of evolved.
And for our listeners at home who might not be able to see a visual of this hammer, I feel like when I saw it, I thought, of course, it's reinventing the wheel, but in a way that seems so necessary or obvious. And the second you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, of course. So the head is at a 90-degree angle, but because of the way the handle curves, it can still clear the plate struts, which is what I always have such a pain doing right now. I have a Fuyan with a carbon fiber handle, the ball end and everything, but I have to have a backup hammer in my bag for whenever I'm dealing with a piano that has those super high plate struts. And it's such a pain because my backup doesn't have the ball end, and then my hand starts hurting, so I have to put a brace on, and it's just...
The caveat on that, it does have pretty nice clearance, but it's the same as all of them. At some point, you have to put a long tip on it.
Yeah. Well, how do you source the wood for the handles? I hear that it's entailed a lot of hoisting of logs over your shoulder in the Canadian wilderness, which is extremely cool, if I do say so myself.
So arbutus trees grow on Vancouver Island, and I have friends on Vancouver Island, so it's a nice excuse to go visit them. So that's where the arbutus comes from, and it's a beautiful light-colored wood, which often has some beautiful patterns in it, and it's just an option to the applewood. So it's generally I use the arbutus because it's kind of rare and fun, and also the applewood from the interior here. And the applewood is wonderful to work with.
How so?
It just often has really pretty patterns, and it doesn't split easily. It's just a nice, solid, fun wood to work with.
Yeah, I used to work with a guitar company that sourced a lot of really interesting, sustainable tone woods from all over the place. And they used myrtle wood a lot, which I think they grew off the coast of Oregon. But it was just gorgeous looking and it sounded gorgeous as well. I don't remember ever seeing apple wood anywhere. I don't know anything about it.
The tree doesn't generally grow big enough that it would be useful for guitars.
I see.
You're usually dealing with a piece that would maybe be 6 inches across.
Gotcha.
So mostly my handles are all made from applewood branches. So it's a no tree has to die situation.
Gotcha. I like that.
Speaking of the myrtle wood, I do have a technician from Louisiana contacted me, and he's sending me up some myrtle.
Ooh, I would love to hear about how that goes.
Well, we'll have to check back in.
All right. Well, now that you've designed the tuning hammer of your dreams, do you see yourself branching out to create other tools as well? Or if you were to use this experience to create something else, what do you see yourself making?
More tuning hammers, for sure.
Yep, you
And
bet.
I have sort of developed a fixation with handles of all sorts. I noticed I have an old cast iron pot, for example, and I never really looked at it, but it has an old, ugly oak handle on it that's kind of falling apart. So I'm going to make a new handle for that.
Gosh.
You come across just old tools that are beautiful tools, but the handles are ugly.
Yeah.
Voicing tools often. Any kind of common tool that I can maybe make a little bit better or just more comfortable to use.
Yeah, my mind immediately went to this 3-needle voicing tool that I have where the handle is made out of plastic. And so I thought I was bad at voicing because I had to work twice as hard in order to get it to penetrate, 10 millimeters in the dense space hammers. But then I got a really thick yan wood handled. It smelled like cedar when I got it. 3-needle voicing tool. And now it's amazing. And I love to voice with it. So I totally empathize there. But out of curiosity, do you make the handles on a lathe or how does that process work?
No, I don't use a lathe because they're sculpted.
Oh.
There's little dips here and there for hand placement, to relieve hand pressure. So doing it on a lathe just doesn't work. And also the center of my handles are oblong. The tops are round and the center is oblong because when you're gripping the center is not round and it just feels better and the balance is nicer.
Right. So you make all the handles by hand?
So I start off with a angle grinder and a disc burr.
Gotcha.
So I rip it down and get it pretty close to the shape I want that way. And then I use the belt sander. And then I spend hours and hours sanding by hand.
Ooh, and see, because I've never held one, I didn't even know about the dimples. That's genius. I love that. So how do you customize the hammer per technician?
I start with, I ask for a hand measurement. So you should never fully have to close your hand on a tool. There should always be a little bit of space. So I figure out their hand size and then sort of compare it to mine and make a shape that their hand can grip without having to fully close tightly on at any point. That's where I'm going with it. But lots of technicians go, no. I just want a traditional shaped handle and I don't want any funny business. So the fun part is I'm finding out that we really are all different and we have very sensitive hands. Some people, like the slightest little bump or something just sends people over the edge. Other people, you could just give them, a chunk of brick and they would tune it down with it and not even bat an eye.
Yeah, and you said you didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but for something that we're using every single day, I'm kind of surprised to think that we're only just now kind of starting to think about how we might be affected by it. So when I use my oblong wooden-handled backup lever, my hand starts to hurt because I have to tune in this claw-like motion.
Ow.
And it's probably from when I started developing carpal tunnel back in the day. But, it was affordable when I was starting out, so, it worked for what I was doing, but...
Yeah, when, we kind of adapt to the tool that we have to use, and if we don't know we have options, we just assume this is it, and our bodies make do with it.
Yeah. It feels really similar to when you first realize that you should buy a good mattress and not just inherit a crummy one from your family member, because it's also something that we use every single day.
I'm finding that piano technicians in certain areas have certain preferences. Like all the guys in Ottawa right now who have been ordering hammers are very specific that they want their hammers to have some definite weight to them. Technicians from the States, nice and light. The handles I'm getting orders from Europe, people want traditional. They don't want this weird curvy stuff where, in the States, if it's not curvy, then that doesn't look right anymore. So I think what happens is somebody will say this is because we don't know what our options are, or the best way to do things. So somebody will say something and then we all go, okay, well, that must be the way to do it.
See, that's really interesting. I like that. I would love to see like a scatter plot map of all the different tuning lever popularities and preferences across the regions. That would be really fun.
I was thinking it would sort of be like the red and the blue states.
Yeah, curvy versus oblong. And it's not so crazy to think that I don't know what the industry is like in Canada, but in the United States, with piano technology being such a male-dominated industry for so long, it's not so crazy to think that all the tuning levers available today were designed by men for men rather than for a female grip,
They are.
Yeah?
I mean, we are shorter. Our arms are shorter. Everything needs to be different.
Yeah.
So being able to make a handle that will fit a smaller hand and, a longer handle gives you leverage. But if you're short, you can't really cope with it because you're standing on your tippy toes to try and get to the top of it.
Exactly.
And I try and put grips lower down so that if you can't reach the top of it, you can control it from the middle as easily. And also because they do have a little more weight, that gives you some advantage.
Okay.
And they do have a little bit of flex. And the flex is nice because when you break that inertia, it bounces back right away and you don't overshoot your mark. So doing fine micro movements and getting a super tight unison is amazing. That's not just coming from me, that's coming from all my guinea pigs. That is where this thing really is a little bit different. It's much, much better if you can try it first. The only thing I have found is that I sent a couple demo hammers to Ottawa and the guys really liked them and some bought them. And then they go, oh, wait, this is not like the demo hammer. And every handle is different a little bit.
I see. Yeah. And I remember when I saw a photo of it on social media for the first time with the hole in the middle of the steel part of the handle, I thought it might have an effect on flex, but I wasn't sure. So I'm glad to hear that. But I texted her immediately and said, what is that? Where can I get one?
The feedback's been kind of shocking. Like I expected some people to like them and some not to, but it's kind of overwhelming that people are so in love with them. So with that in mind, the rental ones are also available for sale, and you can also pay for them in 3 payments.
Awesome. Now, out of curiosity, I remember you saying earlier that you come from a long line of inventors. Now, have you made a lot of other knickknacks, doodads, gizmos that are particularly fun or stick out in your memory?
On my mom's side, my great-grandfather was the one who invented the Dryce brake. So all the grandkids and kids afterwards figured they were inventors because he'd managed that one.
What was the first tool that you made?
Well, the first tool would be the Ergo tuning hammer. But the first thing I invented was the hot water bottle bear, because it's very cold up here in the winter. So it's a little teddy bear that you can put a hot water bottle in. And then at the racetrack, I invented a coat rack that would have a little horse head cut out on the top and then these sort of horse leg shapes at the bottom, and used racehorse shoes for where you hang your coat.
That's so cute. Whenever I can salvage old parts from a piano, I'll use the old keys to make key hangers.
Oh,
so I'll
brilliant.
glue sets of the keys together, and then the cap stands work for a great place to hang your keys. Also, I will save grand piano hammers because you can turn them into little snowman ornaments.
Oh.
And so those have always been a really big hit for me at Christmas.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But anyway, I find that a lot of stories about tool crafting come from a simple desire for something better. It comes from that spark of inspiration, and then after plenty of blood, sweat, and tears, I'm sure you finally have the tool from your imagination. So for others who might be dreaming up similar designs, what is your most practical advice for starting that journey and what people should expect? What was the insider advice that guided you the most throughout that process?
First of all, check your finances because it isn't going to be cheap. And instead of thinking about it that I'm going to put this much money in and I'm going to make this much money back, just forget about money. And it's just for the fun of it. Consider it a hobby. You're going to spend quite a bit of money just for the hobby of it. In the process, I've learned to concentrate. Like when you're handling an angle grinder and you stop paying attention, that's going to be a really unfortunate situation and a pretty gory mess to clean up. So little things like that. And then, I'll start to try something and I go, oh, I can't do this. It's just not making sense. And then all of a sudden the neural pathways come together and, oh, okay, you can do this. So especially as like I'm 62, it's a really good brain exercise to invent stuff. The other thing is, just because somebody says, no, that's a stupid idea, don't do that, ask at least 6 people and then decide, because you're going to get people who are, oh, no, that's dumb. And then other people go, oh, wow, that's amazing. And it may not actually even be that amazing yet. Yeah. So you kind of balance in the middle, and just don't get discouraged when people tell you that's stupid.
Yeah. And I feel like even if 6 people tell you it's a dumb idea, if you still want to do it for your hobby, then you should just go for it anyway.
Yeah.
I also feel like the advice that I heard in there is know when is a comfortable stopping point.
Yeah.
If you're really, slamming your head against the drawing board and you can't find a way around, it sounds like being patient with yourself and giving yourself the space to think about it a little bit more can be really helpful too.
Yes, you have to keep the process fun because it may never go anywhere.
Yep.
So it's all about the process.
Yep, 100%.
And the joy of it.
Well, to wrap us up, can you tell me about your favorite part of piano technology and your favorite tool? Or maybe even second favorite, since I imagine the Ergo leads by leaps and bounds at this point.
Okay, yes. I have a voicing tool. It's got 3 needles and you can roll it down so your needles are longer or shorter. And the handle is just beautifully shaped and the weight is amazing.
Okay, Deborah, well, you have been a fabulous guest, and thank you so much for joining us, and I hope I get to catch you in Canada soon.
Thank you, McKinley, for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Another big shout out to Deborah for joining us on the show today, and if you're already itching to get your hands on an Ergo tuning lever, you can visit the collection on proptn.org to rent it, buy it, or pay it off through a monthly payment plan. If you plan to buy one, the weight, handle width, and length can all be customized. Just remember that the rental hammers are also for sale, so if you want to try the shape before you buy it, we got you covered. Till next time, listeners.